Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. As you can see, we've got Tim still. Many people will remember from, I think the last time you were on, actually, Tim, was the Paris signing, I think it was, back last summer.
That's
it
right.
Must have been.
Yeah, Keats. Yeah, that's right.
Been quite a while, and we've got a debutant with us as well. Mia, thank you for joining us. If people don't know who you are, do you want to just introduce yourself for people who may not have seen you on Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. So I am... I'm a WSL writer. I write for Vavel at the minute. I'm also a master's student, so I'm sort of flitting between the two at the minute. But yeah, I've got a massive interest in WSL. I don't necessarily support a team, so that's why Connor's brought me in as a neutral today.
Yeah, a bit of a Millie Turner fan I hear as well, which I'm sure we're gonna get to. You did obviously write a piece about Millie Turner potentially hoping obviously for an England spot as well, which is a good article as well. If people should definitely United fans should want to read as well.
Yeah, definitely. I also wrote one about Caitlin Ford as well, which I've just clocked as well. So there we go. Manchester United and Arsenal.
There we go. We cover all bases on here, that is for sure. Right, I'll come to you first, Tim. Obviously, huge game on Wednesday night. This will obviously we're recording this on Monday night. This will go out tomorrow on Tuesday. How are you feeling kind of ahead of it? Because we were just saying on our match reaction for the Brighton game that it feels like a must not lose for both at this stage of the season, whereas the one at the Emirates maybe didn't have that kind of jeopardy with it. How are you feeling as an Arsenal fan going into it?
Yeah, it's from Arsenal's perspective, it's another huge game. I think basically the winner of this game, what happens is the winner of this game establishes themselves as the main challenger to Chelsea for the title. I think that's what happens here, and Chelsea have got injuries themselves, and they've got Champions League, and they've got two massive, much like Arsenal, they've got two massive Champions League ties. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Chelsea will go to the title. So essentially, the winner of this game has a good shot at winning the league. Not to say they will, but a good shot, and that makes it a bit like it's not a final, but maybe a semi-final. I'd say so. I think the winner emerges as the kind of the one that's like nudging for the kind of winning fence post. But from an Arsenal perspective, like all of our games have been like this recently, to be honest. Like the way the fixtures have fallen for Arsenal, it's just been Chelsea, City, Bayern, United. Like we knew the second half of the season was going to be like this. The first half was much gentler. So this game, just like the City game before it, just like we've got Chelsea away in May as well, these have all had a red ring around them. And I think we've known since the beginning of the season that these games would be defining in one way or another. So from an Arsenal perspective, it feels... I don't feel as nervous as I thought I would, just because, like I said, it just feels like every Arsenal game is like this at the moment. It feels like every game's like a final or a semi-final against a rival. And at the moment, Arsenal have gone well in those games so far. So, you know, I hope that there's an element from an Arsenal perspective of muscle memory of, okay, been here, done this a lot over the last 6 weeks. Let's just go and do it again. But we'll see on Wednesday evening.
It's fair, but you mentioned a few things I'm going to come back to in just a second. But Mia, for yourself, looking at it from a more of a neutral standpoint, is this just a good game to watch from the outside? Because, you know, as Tim said there, whoever really wins this, I'd go as far as to say I think whoever wins this probably stays in the top three. It'll be pretty incredible for one of them to drop out from there. How are you kind of viewing it as a neutral looking at it?
Yeah, I think Tim sums it up perfectly. It's two big teams who have had good seasons, exciting players in each team. From a neutral standpoint, it's exactly what you want from a game of football. You know they're going to bring attacking football, positive football, technical football. So yeah, 100% it's a game to look forward to. And I agree. I think whoever wins that game, you know, really makes their mark on the top three, definitely.
I think something I wanted to pick up on, Tim, that you said, you mentioned about obviously mentality. United, this is probably, we've been in this position before, maybe not this late into the season with kind of the kind of run that we've been on. Is that what maybe will separate the side, or I guess what I'm trying to say is, from an Arsenal perspective, are you feeling a bit more confident because of that? Because United are in this. So we were there under Casey, we were pushing, obviously had a bit of a drop off towards the back end of that season. Last season, we just dropped out of the top 3, but we were nowhere near the title in that one. The fact that Arsenal have been here before, you're playing Champions League semi-finals, is that a positive, I guess, in your favour, or do you not think it matters this season because of the run that United have been on?
I think it potentially does matter, but my kind of read from the outside on United is that I actually think United have been smart this season. I think the smartest thing they did was to dump the Conti Cup in the bin, quite frankly, not least because, like, for Arsenal didn't really do the FA Cup this year because we drew Chelsea away, but we got the Conti Cup. So I feel like sometimes you have to choose one of those domestic trophies, and Arsenal and United have kind of made their choices. I think that could make a difference, but I am kind of minded of something that Jonas Eidevall said a few weeks ago, and I think this applies to United as well. After the Bayern game, he said that a good process will maintain you for the medium term, but sooner or later you need the results for belief. And Arsenal and United have both been there this season in terms of, for Arsenal, winning that Conti Cup final was a huge, like, in the intangible element about giving the team that belief. Like, I think Jonas has done a good job. I think Arsenal are well coached. I understand what they're trying to do when they play. I think he's a smart, good manager, and I think we're on the right track. But sooner or later, you've got to put something on the table. And I think that's true of United as well. But, like, in terms of building belief, the reverse fixture, I think everyone understands how big that was for United to go and win that game, and not just win that game. But I think there were two elements of winning that game for United. I think, first of all, they did outplay Arsenal for large spells, and Arsenal were perhaps a bit lucky to go 2-1 up. But having gone 2-1 up, to then lose it late. So I think that almost had like a double kicker for United's belief. Because if you're Mark Skinner, you say, all right, we won that late, and that's a brilliant adrenaline rush. But also, when you watch the game, like, United had the better of about 60, 70 minutes of that game. And those big results, they're just huge in terms of building belief in teams. But sooner or later, like, one only sustains you for so long. Arsenal have probably still caught the wind a little bit from that Conti Cup game, and they've gone and beaten City and Bayern. And for United, it's probably time for another result like that, because that was in November, I believe. Have you guys got to play City?
City at home, again, second to last game.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. And City at home. You got City at home. You got Arsenal at home. Like, again, it's one of those, putting the result on the table type things. But for United, I think they have. So I think you're right. Arsenal potentially do have that advantage of having had recent big game victories. Where United have an advantage is they've had a very settled team all season. And this is where the teams are very different. Arsenal have had loads of injuries this year, had to keep adapting, which actually I think will make them stronger in the long term. And what United have done, particularly the goalkeeper, the back four, Hayley Ladd and Katie Zellum, have played very, very consistently. And that core is hugely important. And a lot of those players, are in international squads, but maybe don't start. There hasn't been Champions League. So, like, United have, and that's what you need when you want to get a foothold in the top 3. You need a season like that. And that's why United needed to just throw the Conti Cup in the bin and not bother with it, and just keep that. And I understand, I know that Mark Skinner gets a lot of criticism for not rotating, but to be fair, I think that's more in you want to rotate like the front 4 positions and substitutions, etc. But that, like, back 6 or 7, that I think that's been absolutely critical to United's success this season. Probably more like it's Toon and Russo that get like the headlines and a lot of the talk, but I think the Ladd and Zellum double pivot in particular, and the fact it's been so consistently. So I think what you've got here is a team that keeps having to adapt versus a team that's had a very solid, consistent core this season, which makes it quite fascinating, I think.
It's interesting. I'm definitely going to come back to Mark Skinner towards the end, just to get. I ask every opposition fan this because you're right, as you said there, Skinner gets a lot of stick from our own fan base more than anywhere else. Well, everyone on this channel knows my views on it. I don't get it in the slightest, but that's a whole other story. Mia, for yourself, how have you kind of viewed United this season in particular? Because as Tim said, obviously we got that win away. That felt from a United point of view like a turning point for us, because it was like we've gone away to Arsenal at the Emirates as well. It wasn't obviously at the usual ground, obviously at Boreham Wood. It felt like a big moment to us. We then had Chelsea after the international break. I can't remember whether Arsenal was before or after, actually, but we had Chelsea in the next fixture at LSV. And for 60 minutes, we were pretty much in that game as well. And it really felt like obviously then individual errors, Chelsea go 2 up, and the game was kind of lost from there. But how have you viewed United? Do you see a different United this season to previous seasons? Or
yeah, I think it's just that sense of belief that they've got. I feel like the Euros helped that. Obviously, they've come back, and a lot of players, not necessarily just the Lionesses, but internationals that come back from that tournament who have played well, have come back into this team. Mark Skinner's got them fired up. There's definitely been a couple of games where the first half United have not been clinical enough. They're going at half time. I remember watching an Elatoon, I can't remember what game it was, an Elatoon interview. And I said, what did Mark Skinner say at half time? Because you come out and tore them apart. And she was like, he shouted at us, like, wake up. We're not playing how we normally do. And I like Mark Skinner. I know there's a lot of different views about him. But he's got this team, as I say, fired up. Everyone knows their roles. Everyone knows what they're doing. As Tim said, the relationship between the players is so obvious on the pitch. Everyone knows what they're looking for and who they're looking for, and each player knows the role that they're supposed to have. And I think that's the big thing with United this season, and beating teams that are like notorious winners like Arsenal and Chelsea. Chelsea's a hard one. They face each other again in the FA Cup, obviously, and they'll have a lot of confidence, United, coming into this game, having progressed to the final of that competition. But yeah, United have just got that sense of belief about them this year, and the clinical finishes. And yeah, I think there's something stupid, like one of the games they had 5 different goal scorers. Their goals can come from anywhere and anyone. Whoever, Rachel Williams comes off the bench and can finish games. It's scary for opponents.
I'm pretty sure, unless the stat has changed recently, we still have the highest amount of different scorers in the league. I can't remember exactly. It's something like 16 or something ridiculous. Obviously, I know City and Villa have obviously got their standouts. Obviously, well, to be fair, I'd do anything to get Bunny Shaw at United. That's another conversation. I think the interview you were referencing, I'm pretty sure that was Old Trafford against West Ham, I think, because we came out in that second. Right. Obviously, Garcia came on and completely tore West Ham apart. On that side as well. Something obviously, Tim, you mentioned as well, I wanted to pick up on before we're going to talk obviously about Arsenal's injuries and a couple of standout players and things like that. You mentioned about whoever wins this has got the closest title challenge to City and to Chelsea, and obviously on paper, yes, obviously they will have. Do you, from the outside, do you think United have the capabilities to push for a title? Obviously, statistics show. Well, the points tally shows that we're in the fight. But I noticed this a lot, not just on Twitter, it's in the ground as well, that there's a lot of United fans that just will not accept that we're in this title race. Do you see United as kind of title contenders, or do you just think other teams have dropped off a little bit and United have just capitalised on that?
I do see United as title contenders. I mean, like, it's mid-April, United are title contenders, but I've seen them that way for a long time. I completely understand the reticence over that, like flipping it to the men's side slightly. Arsenal men are in a title race, and it took a lot of us a long time to admit that, because it felt like not uncharted territory, but somewhere we'd just not been in so long. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to say this. I don't know if I want to admit this is happening, but you get to a stage where, yes, it's happening. I do think there is an element to which United have been able to take advantage of, like I said, I think one of the things that annoys me from an Arsenal perspective is I really think Chelsea were there for the taking this year. I think this has been a transitional year for Chelsea. They lost She, they've not had Melly Leupolz, so their midfield is as workmanlike as I've seen it for quite a long time. And then they've lost Kirby and Pernilla Harder as well. And like, I think Chelsea are quite functional. And from an Arsenal perspective, I think we probably had too many. Well, losing Beth Mead and Vivian Miedema at the same time was just, I think, is going to be too damaging in terms of the short-term points dropped. And then City, I mean, City have kept faith with Gareth Taylor. I'm really not sure why. But it sounds like his contract is up at the end of the season. It doesn't sound like it's going to be renewed. So I do think they've been a little bit handicapped there, but also like they lost their entire midfield and Lucy Bronze in the summer. So I think basically all of the other title contenders are carrying scar tissue this year. And what United have been able to capitalise on is some good summer business, some good signings, but also, not having Champions League, not having lost your entire starting midfield, not having loads of injuries. And those things are all significant, right? When I look at Arsenal, Leah Williamson was injured on international duty. Raffaele and Vivian Miedema were injured in Champions League games. Like the confluence of games kind of costs you players. And this, for me, is a maybe not a once in a lifetime, but like there's a window for United this year, basically, because the other teams have got a bit of scar tissue. United have been able to focus on the league. They've largely kept key players fit, particularly at the base of the team, like I said. And I think they've made hay with that. But I've seen progression in United as well. Like for me, it's not just the kind of doing Villa 5-0 at Old Trafford. It's the doing Reading 1-0 in the last couple of minutes. Like those are the games I feel like a season or two ago United were dropping points. I know there was the draw with Everton. I watched that game and I felt United were a little bit unlucky, but I also think Everton have improved. But it's those like 1-0s. That to me is what United weren't doing a year or two ago. And so like I look at it like United have found more ways to win games now. And that's title contention right there. The next challenge might come if United qualify for the Champions League. How do they deal with that? How would they deal with the increased fixture load? How would they deal with having like qualifiers in the summer and all of that? Those things are really disruptive. But and I do think the experiences of recent seasons will stand United in good stead, because sometimes not doing it and not doing it in the same way teaches you some stuff. But I think that's what's on the line here with United. It's these games against Arsenal and Man City. It's what have United learned from losing those games in previous seasons.
100%. As Mia, you mentioned, obviously Chelsea's the one hurdle we're still yet to get over, still not managed to beat them. We're saving that for the cup final, though, when we go down to their second home Wembley and turn them over, hopefully, because hopefully that'll be a good day for us. But Mia, for yourself, just before obviously we talk about kind of Arsenal's injuries and key players and things like that, same question really. Do you kind of see United as this title contention team? Because as Tim said there, we're in mid-April now. Surely by now, in the position we're in, we're still top scorers in the league. We've conceded the least. We're currently top, but Chelsea should get back ahead of us with their game in hand. Why do you think it is that like some fans maybe don't see United as title contention? Do you think it is purely that we just don't believe that we should be here, or do you think that there's a little bit more to it than that?
In the grand scheme of things, United is still a new team, right? So to sort of go up to, I think they did the championship in 1 year, got promoted straight away. This building, they've finally got to the place where they believed from starting this team that they should be, and they should be title contenders. And I think it's natural to probably doubt that slightly because it's new and it's not happened before. But I think it's well deserved. And again, like Tim said, there is no better opportunity for Man United to win this league. And I think it'd be, again, speaking on a neutral sort of playing field, it would be sad to not see them lift that trophy come the end of the season, because I think they deserve it 100%. Yeah.
Just very quickly, Tim, as an Arsenal fan, would you prefer United to win it over Chelsea, or what?
This is a question that I've seen Arsenal fans discuss, and it's a really difficult one to answer, because we don't have a lot of love for either team, right? But I think the general consensus is probably that we're a bit inured to Chelsea doing it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas it feels like, and also it's maybe easier to compartmentalize not doing it when Chelsea do it, if you know what I mean. Whereas if United do it, I think a lot of us will be frustrated and say, we really had a chance there. So honestly, I think, like, Arsenal's biggest rivalry in women's football is Chelsea. Like, Arsenal fans don't really care about Tottenham women that much, I don't think. But I just think because they've done it so many times now, it's easier to compartmentalize. I think it's as simple as that, to be honest.
It's interesting you say that. That's kind of how I feel about City men's side. Like, if they go on and win the league, it's just like, okay, fine.
Who cares?
They've done it so many times. I don't know that many City fans, so I don't really care if they do. But yeah, I mean, obviously as United, personally, I don't think we will. I just think Chelsea, the game in hand that they've got. If we'd have beaten them at Kingsmeadow, 100%, I'm sat here right now saying we can. But no, not after that defeat down there. Albeit should have had a couple of penalties in that one. But there we are. Mia, I'll come to yourself then. Talking about this game in particular, starting off from an Arsenal point of view. In fact, no, I'll flip it. I'll do it the other way around, actually. From a United point of view, do you think LSV will help from looking at, obviously, the last game, obviously, we beat them at the Emirates, bigger stadium. We know that United traditionally have actually done quite well on the bigger pitches. We've got a good record at Old Trafford, did well at the Etihad, and obviously the game at the Emirates. How do you think LSV is a factor in this? Because our home form this season is pretty strong. Only obviously the draw to Everton, which, to be fair, if anyone watched that game, we absolutely battered them. Just could not score. I think we could have played for another 2 hours and we wouldn't have scored in that one. It was just one of those. And obviously the defeat to Chelsea as well. Do you think that will play a factor? Obviously, the kickoff time obviously got moved. We don't know what the attendance is going to be, but it looks strong ticket sales wise. Obviously, we've got the standing section behind the goal again. Do you think that will play into United's hands, or do you think that it doesn't really make too much difference in this case?
No, definitely. I think always you have to, in a player's mindset sort of view, a home advantage, home crowd, you know, that has to be a benefit for you. There's more people rooting for you than there aren't. That, for me, if I was a player in that situation, is only going to motivate me more. But then that can also be flipped from an Arsenal perspective. Again, if I was a player on the Arsenal team going to LSV, and there will be Arsenal fans there too, but the majority of them being United fans, there's that sort of motivation I would have to be like, okay, let's go and show them who we are. So it really depends. I think personally, United do have the advantage. They've got loud fans. They travel well up and down the country this season. They've travelled really well. They make themselves known. So I think it should be an advantage, but it really, I think, depends on how the players react to the occasion.
It's interesting that you mention the occasion, because obviously we said that obviously about the game of the weekend that we've just played against Brighton. Did the occasion get to the players a little bit in the first half? Obviously, first time in the FA Cup semi-final, and that first half was probably one of the worst I've seen us start a game for the majority of the season, really. Tim, from an Arsenal point of view, we'll start with Katie McCabe then. Obviously got that yellow card, which meant she was suspended. Yeah. An interesting yellow card, to say the least. With that, I don't even know what to call it. I'll just call it an instant, because I don't know what else to call it. How big of a loss is she going to be, obviously, on that left-hand side? Because I think most United fans would 100% take her at United. How big of a loss is she in this one?
Yeah, big loss. She's been, Jonas said it himself after the Man City game, in this block of games in particular, these massive games, she's been up there as Arsenal's best performer against City, Bayern, Chelsea in the Conti Cup final. She's found a real knack for winning penalties. A phrase I use advisedly. Not least I know Katie quite well. So, but no, like a big loss, and not least as well because at left back Steph Catley, she, as we're recording this on Monday, she trained today. But I mean, I don't. That was her first day in training. So from a left back perspective, I don't know how fit she'll be to start. That in itself, I think we can play Noelle Maritz at left back, and that's not a big problem at all. She's a super player. But I think losing Katie from the forward line, particularly because Caitlin Ford is injured as well. It's kind of it's almost difficult to know how Arsenal will line up in the front three because it's been very much like Caitlin on the left and either Victoria Pelova or Katie McCabe on the right. Lena Hurtig's injured as well, so we might be in the realms of starting Gio on the right wing. I wouldn't mind that at all. I think she's a super player, but she's not started for us in a WSL game yet. So it's a massive loss, but both because she's been playing brilliantly, but also because of other injuries in that area. So to be frank, I don't know what Arsenal's front three is really going to be on Wednesday night. But then Arsenal have been in that situation a couple of times before this season where they've had to work out solutions. But we'll see. But she's an enormous miss in two big respects.
And Mia, for yourself, looking at obviously from as a United fan, I'd be saying let's just target that side. Our right hand side attacking the left has not been. That's been the one position that Tim mentioned stability this season. That's probably been the one side we've not seen stability. It's been Thomas at times, it's been Paris, it's been Garcia. We've seen Russo put out there. We've seen a number of players on that right hand side. Do you think that is an area United should attack? Obviously, Tim mentioned a couple of options that we could see from an Arsenal side there, or do you just think Arsenal's strength in depth, whoever they put there, will do a good enough job anyway against our forward line on that side?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where Mark Skinner's going to know that, and I think Idaville's going to know that as well. I think that he knows that they're probably going to target down that side. They'll prepare for it. They will prepare for it. I think United just have to play their game. Katie McCabe is a huge loss. Is a huge loss. But I don't think that purely targeting that area is the way forward. United work well on both flanks. They work well down the middle. I think it would be an added sort of assistance to them, maybe. But yeah, I think either side will prepare for that. It's not going to be easy at all.
And Tim, you mentioned a couple of the injuries there. So who is actually from what you've seen or heard or anything else, who is actually out from I know you're not going to want to give too much away if you do know stuff that you don't want in the public domain. But what are you kind of
I think it's all out there, basically. Yeah, so Kim Little's out for the season. That's been known for a few weeks, but Arsenal only announced it today because they couldn't keep pretending they didn't know, essentially. And I think also they wanted to put the news out. Jonas has a press conference on Tuesday when it had been asked anyway, but I think also they wanted to. Sometimes if a player's not on the team sheet and players only discover that just before a game, it can give them a lift. And I think this was maybe about let United know 2 days, over 48 hours in advance and let that die down. I'm sure most of their players knew anyway. So Kim's definitely out. So Leah Williamson will move into midfield, I'm sure. Leah Volti was in training today. She took a little bit of time out during the international break. So it looks like she will play as well. So the midfield will certainly be, I think, Leah Williamson, Leah Volti and Frida Mornham. But then after that, it's about whether Steph Catley can start. She was in full training today, so maybe 2 days of full training, they'll make a decision on that. I tend to think they might leave it just because Noel Marritz can play left back so well. And then Caitlin Ford was pictured in training, but not training with the ball with the full group. She was with the fitness coach. So I think the aim for her is more the Wolfsburg game on Sunday. She did a hamstring injury and she did it 2.5 weeks ago. And those are usually 3-week injuries. So it looks like that's the kind of team news. Lena Hurtig had surgery on her foot. No idea how long she's out for, but she's not going to play in this game either. So that's kind of where Arsenal are. The interesting aspect for Arsenal is who they pick in goal, because we now move to a stage where Jonas has got 2 goalkeepers that he likes, and he moves between them depending, I think, on the opposition. I think he might select Sabrina D'Angelo for this game because she's quick off her line. She's much more commanding in the air. And given how much Arsenal have suffered at the hands of Alessia Russo over the last couple of seasons, I think a goalkeeper that comes out and gets some of those crosses, be it catching them or punching them, might be where Jonas goes for this game. That's where I'd tell you to keep your eye on the goalkeeper, because there's 2 there that he's quite happy to select one or other.
It certainly is interesting. When we were talking about this on yesterday's show, by the time this goes out, we were trying to work out who is going to start for Arsenal. And obviously, goalkeeper was one of those positions. You mentioned the forward line. Potentially, there's a spot opened up there as well. You mentioned, obviously, Williamson going into midfield. I think that pretty much makes sense as well. I'm going to come back to Frida in a second because, anyone who watches me on this channel knows I follow Norway quite a lot, and she is by far one of my favourites. Non-United players up there with a couple of the other Norwegian girls as well. But Mia, for yourself, I wanted to talk, obviously, you was one of the first people actually really to call the Millie Turner England shout, or start that conversation at least, from outside of United, really, because it was only really United fans starting that conversation. And it's something we spoke about on our Brighton show, where we were saying we've got the best defence in the league as it stands. Obviously, Laetitia, I think everyone can see her quality, but Millie Turner doesn't seem to be in that conversation. What have you made of her and kind of the back line, the back 5 really, that's been so consistent for United this season?
Yeah, do you know what? It was one of those things where, so I only really started covering WSL football in about February. And I was just watching for fun as a football fan, and I was noticing that United games tend to be the same as Arsenal. They tend to be broadcast more than other games, a bit more accessible. So I was watching it on like the BBC, and the relationship between Turner and Laetitia is so incredible. They understand each other really well, and I think that's where the relationship with Earps knocks into that as well. And I think the back line for United have massively helped the cause for Mary Earps this season. She's an unbelievable goalkeeper, don't get me wrong, but they really have 10 clean sheets, I think, Earps has had this season. So yeah, I think she's commanding in the air. She's confident in her passing. She's one of the best ball playing defenders in the league. And she was consistent. From what I was watching, she was consistent. And every time I'd watch her, and every time I'd watch Laetitia as well, they were good. They were really good. And I had to do a bit more Googling on it, and I found out that the last time she was called up, and the first time she was ever called up for a senior England spot was in 2021, before Serena Wiegman took over. And since that point in time, she's done a hell of a lot better than before she was called up. So the back line for England is a hard one to drop. With Millie Bright out, Alex Greenwood ended up going home, but I just felt like that opportunity, the finalissima, the game against Australia, would have been a really brilliant opportunity for her to go and prove herself. She's 26. She's got a bit of experience, like, domestically. She has been around the England camp before. She knows Laetitia. She knows Mary Earps. She can work with Alessia Russo. I just think for one of the best defences in the league, she needs to be in there. But I do understand that problems that, like the goal she essentially set up for Brighton last week, the big games, as you mentioned earlier, she sort of falters a little bit, and I think that's probably where Sarina Wiegman's like, these are all big games for England, and especially coming up to the World Cup, which I did say that she needs to be called up for. I just think she needs to be a part of the team. She's got a good personality, good character, and you can see all the United girls love her. She's been a part of that setup since the beginning. So yeah, I do fight for her a little bit.
It's certainly an interesting conversation. I don't quite know where I stand on it. I think if there was ever going to be a time, it would have been, as you mentioned, the last international break, with the injuries obviously England had in the back line. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask the question because I find it, we were just discussing it, I find it strange, best defence in the league, and it's only Laetitia that gets put in that conversation. But there we are. Tim, for yourself, obviously key player that I highlighted, you might name a few more. Frida Marnham. Now, I can't remember how many goals she's on, but it's definitely double figures. Is it 14, 15 she's on now?
Yeah, I believe so.
Exactly
in all competitions, yeah.
It's around that. And I mean, talk to us about her and any other key players that United should be watching out for. Because I think if anyone is obviously new to watching women's football, they'd say the usual: it's Mead, Amara, it's Mead. Obviously, both of those are not going to be involved in this one. So Marnham and anyone else that you think is going to be a danger for United.
Yeah, sure. Frida, definitely. Frida is one of Arsenal's best and most important attackers. She struggled to get in the team last year because Vivian Miedema was playing in the number 10 role, but I mean, not even just that Viv got injured. Frida actually got into the team ahead of Viv initially. She played away at Lyon, and then she played so well in that game that she kept her place. And Frida is a very, very powerful player. She's a big player. She's very strong. She'll buff it through, and she'll whack the ball at goal. Again, like she scored in the reverse fixture with a deflected shot. Not a massive coincidence. She scored an almost identical goal against Tottenham recently, where she kind of that sums her game up. Like she just runs through midfield and just Hulk smashes people out of the way and tries to smash the ball into the net. She's an easy player to appreciate. There's not a lot of subtlety, I think, to Frida Marnham, and she's become such a huge player for Arsenal, and would definitely be in the conversation for player of the season, particularly because we had those two big attacking injuries. So she's a huge one. Ordinarily, I'd say Caitlin Ford as well, but she's not going to be available. Caitlin, for me, would be very much in the conversation for player of the season as well. I think that's going to be a big miss for Arsenal because her ability one-on-one against fullbacks is so good. But if Arsenal plays Gio, I've known about. I used to cover, sometimes still occasionally cover the Brazil team, and this player I've known about for a long time. And what people don't realize about Gio is how intense she is, because people see like Brazilian winger and they have a certain idea in their mind, but she's another one who smashes people out of the way, and she's very, very intense. Loves contact, loves the high press. Amazingly quick, and she'd be a bit of an unknown quantity, I think, because she hasn't played very much. But the player I think that might be most important for Arsenal is probably not an attacking one, and it's Rafaeli at centre back, who has basically never played against Manchester United. She's always been injured when these games have come around, and I really don't think Alessia Russo would have scored as many headers with Rafaeli at centre half, and that's where Arsenal really got bitten in the reverse fixture. They should have brought Jen Beattie on as soon as they went 2-1 up. They didn't. Got done by two headers, but Rafaeli very, very, very strong in the air, and that's where Arsenal have fallen down consistently against United, is managing some of those balls into Russo, and Rafaeli is much more equipped to do that than any of our other centre-halves, again, except for Jen Beattie, who was also great in the air, but doesn't play very much nowadays. So, yeah, for me, Rafaeli could be Arsenal's key player. She's of all the players we've lost through injury, I'm at least really happy that she's going to be available, assuming nothing happens in training tomorrow anyway.
No, fingers crossed. I don't know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, no, fingers crossed, because you've got enough injuries, and I think it kind of takes away from the. I'm not gonna lie, I don't want any excuses coming our way going, oh, we got a load of injuries. You see, I don't want any more, none of that. So it would actually benefit you, me, to be fair, if you didn't get any more of those. Mia, back to yourself. From who do you see as being a danger from a United point of view? Obviously, the obvious Toon, Russo is the two standouts, but as I kind of said on the Brighton show, Galton is right up there, pretty much alongside Russo with the numbers that she's got. As we mentioned earlier, United have got goal scorers all over the place. Garcia's on 6, Rachel Williams is on 6. We've got a lot of players around that kind of 4 to 6 goal tally this season. Who are you kind of looking at as the match winners, I guess, or the standouts from a United point of view?
Yeah, so if you're looking at match winners, I don't think you look any further than Leah Galton. She's been unbelievable. Match winners all over the pitch, as you've just said. I think in terms of standout players, you can't look past, I'm going to butcher her name so bad, Battier?
Spot on.
Battier? Yeah, wonderful. The way she can fly down the wing, her pace, her technical ability, her precision crosses into the box have caused teams just such massive issues across the season. So I think that's a big one for Arsenal to look out for. I think that's your, if you're not talking about Toon, but I do think she's criminally underrated. Has been this season. Has set up countless United goals and makes the chances and gets them forward and just isn't afraid to push through the thirds to get into that attacking area. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
And Tim, just throwing it back to, we'll look to wrap this one up in kind of 10 minutes, so I don't want to get your thoughts on Mark Skinner as well. But also, is that what you'd say? Who are you kind of looking at from in the United team as kind of standouts? Obviously, Honor, as Mia just mentioned, I mean, I'd be throwing every bit of cash and statues and all sorts at her to try and keep hold of her this summer. But who are you looking at from a United point of view that's potentially dangerous for you?
Yeah, I mean, we can't look past Russo because of how many goals she scored against Arsenal. But I think Leah Galton has been, not just this season, I think Leah Galton's clearly been a standout player for United for quite a long time. And if she were, if she hadn't retired from international football and she was playing for England, I think there'd be probably quite a lot more noise about her than there is. And when you look at kind of what's happened in her United career as well, like United brought in Tobin Heath and Nikita Paris and Lucia Garcia, and she's still there. She's still a big player as well, and that's a sign of a really top player as well. I think when you bring other players in, and she just kind of goes, okay, all right, I'll fight for my player, And she's probably the player, because Toon and Russo get so much of the attention when some of these signings happen. She's probably the one that, I don't think, I doubt United fans do this, but she's probably the one that people forget about a bit. And they start going, oh yeah, Toon and Russo and that player will play. And every year it's Leah Galton. And I think she's gone up to another level this season. I just think, I'm sometimes loath to make comparisons to men's players, but sometimes they're irresistible. But she just reminds me so much of Gareth Bale, in that, like, very easy to in terms of how direct she is, that push and run and everything. But she's improved so much on things like coming in on her right side, getting into the centre for the goal she scores, the equaliser against Brighton, it's a centre forwards goal with her right foot. That's where she's really improved. She always had that push and run and get the ball in the area with the left foot, but she's worked on other elements of her game. And yeah, I think Leah Galton, I think she's a superb player, and a player that's very difficult to contain, not least because I don't think there are many wingers like that around. And so I think it's quite difficult for fullbacks to deal with.
100%, I agree. I think if she's part of the Lionesses squad, I think there's a whole different conversation around her. And, that's her own decision, to be fair. As somebody who doesn't particularly like internationals, I am all for that. Choosing the club side over the national side. I'm 100% on board with that. Mia, I wanted to come to yourself, and I'll ask Tim the same question as well. Actually, we have mentioned it. Mark Skinner gets a lot of stick. I think some justified, some I think is way over the top. My own personal view on it. What have you made of him from the outside? Because I'm always intrigued because there's a massive split in the United fan base, which is really weird considering FA Cup final, top of the league right now. How have you kind of viewed, or what do you view Mark Skinner from the outside looking at him, and how he's kind of managed this United side this season?
Yeah, so it's funny. I spoke to you about this a couple of days ago, and I don't understand the negative opinions about him. But again, I'm not involved in the United sort of fandom. Looking from the outside, I think he's brought a team together that's playing fantastic football. Is the bottom line from my perspective. There's clearly a lot of respect there from the players. Ella Toon on that interview, Common spoke very highly about him. Most people do speak pretty highly about him. I don't know where the negativity comes from. I think it's something about changes and not switching the squad round. But again, if a squad's playing consistently well, is there a need to necessarily change it all the time? Again, I don't know. It's probably speaking slightly outside of what I know. But yeah, I like him. I think he's a good guy. He presents himself quite well. And he's built this team that's flying up the league.
And Tim, for yourself, very briefly on Mark Skinner from the outside, how have you kind of viewed him? I think following on from what Mia said very quickly, I think a lot of the criticism is around the changes. You know, I think we have made by far the least amount of changes to our 11 this season. I think it goes back to the whole saying, from my point of view, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it. And what we have seen has worked. I mean, but what's your kind of thoughts on it looking at it from an outsider?
Yeah. I think Mark Skinner's done a good job to this point. I think what United need, particularly after Casey Stoney, because that was a trauma maybe for United, her leaving and the way she left. And I think it would have been quite easy for United to fall back into the pack a little bit after that. I think what they really needed was someone to just come in and really steady things. And I mean steady things in terms of with a style of play. And that's what I think Mark Skinner's done. I think like when you watch United, you know what they're trying to do basically. And that's kind of what you want. I do get the it's not so much about rotation. I think that's a question still to be answered. I don't think United really needed to rotate too much this season. I think there's maybe some question marks over some of those squad player signings. So for example, like I don't really understand what happened with Adriana Leon. I don't, like there seems to be a like Jade Moore and stuff like that, and there seem to be quite a few players where it's like, what was that about, really? Because you've brought a player in and then just really not wanted to use them. But then, like someone like Rachel Williams has really taken on this role as like a finisher. I think coaches call them impactors now, who's like, she's 35, 36. She's not going to play 90 minutes every week, but she's a good player to bring on. But yeah, I do think there are maybe questions to be answered in the future about things like, using it's, like I say, not so much rotation per se, but use of squad players. Like for me, it's not so much the changes to the starting lineups. I think United make the fewest substitutions, certainly in the top four. And when you look at, I think when you break it down by minutes per substitute, like, you get 5 substitutions and usually United make 2, maybe 3. And one of those might be for 2 or 3 minutes. And like at the moment, I don't think that's a problem. It's just a case of whether that becomes a problem next season or the season after or something like that. But then like this might be a stage thing and he might know that. And he might think, actually, what I want at the moment is I want my first 11 to understand exactly what's happening. I want to keep them consistent. And then once I'm happy with that, I can start to bring other players into the mix. And to be fair, Arsenal have done something similar. If you look at Arsenal starting lineups last spring, never, like almost never changed. We played the same team for like weeks and weeks, and this year we haven't done that. So like it's just basically I want to see what happens next season with that. I do understand that criticism, but I think it's maybe that's more of a wait and see than this is bad now.
I think that's a fair argument. I think a lot of United fans that are, I guess, against the criticism, if you will say obviously we've not had the games to rotate this season because we haven't, obviously out of the Conti Cup very early, no Champions League, so we have only really had one game a week pretty much most of the season, obviously because the FA Cup didn't fall midweeks either, so at the moment. But yeah, I think going into next season, certainly some questions to be answered. You mentioned Leon. That's a whole other conversation, which I'm sure we'll chat about once we come off here very briefly. Right, I'll come to each of them before we wrap this one up with your score predictions, because why not? Because we love doing these. We've got our own little predictions league, and I still don't know what I'm going to put in for this one. What I say on here, I will probably change by the time this goes out. I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to let one of you go first and see which one of you is confident enough to throw your score out there first.
I don't mind. I'm going to say 2-1 Arsenal.
I thought you might.
I'm going to go 2-1 United.
Oh, that would have been mine as well, to be fair. I said 2-1 on the Brian show. I'll stick with 2-1 now, although I could see it going the other way. I really don't know. I think that's the fascination with this game, because it really depends what United show up, but equally it depends what Arsenal shows up. You know, if it's the Arsenal that I saw at Bayern away, albeit, to be fair, wasn't that bad in that game, but if it's the Arsenal that we've seen against, obviously second half against City, parts against Bayern as well, particularly obviously the home game, a little bit worried. So I really can't call it. Either way, it's going to be a great spectacle for the league, and a good game, I'm sure, for neutrals to enjoy and watch, and hopefully from a United point of view for the home fans as well. But I'm sure it's going to be rocking Elsphere as well, because Arsenal do bring a lot of fans with them as well. So I think from a fan's point of view, I think it's good that we're going to see two sets of fans, usually very vocal, at games as well, which should make for a really good atmosphere. I'll just get each of you to shout out kind of where people can find you and things like that. Obviously, Tim, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who you are by now. If
for better and for worse,
if they don't, I'll be very surprised. But where can people find you if they don't, or any platforms and things like that?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is at Stillmanator. I write about Arsenal women for a site called Arseblog News, and we have a podcast and blah blah blah, etc. But it's all about Arsenal. So yeah, not sure how much appeal there is for that in a United supporting audience.
To be fair, I do listen and look out for the ones that are not involving WSL. So, because particularly the Champions League ones, as you prepare for your semi-final as well against Wolfsburg as well. So some big ones coming up. Mia, for yourself, where can people find your Twitter at? And obviously, I know you do your journalism as well. Where can people find all of that?
Yeah, so on my personal Twitter, where I put all of my articles and share all of my opinions, are at _Mia Claydon, and you can also follow our women's football page at Vavel, and that's at Woso Vavel on Twitter.
Definitely make sure you go and check those out as well. Obviously, make sure you're liking the video and subscribing wherever you're watching this or whenever you're watching it. Obviously, it goes out on Tuesday afternoon. And if you see us at the game, make sure you come and say hello, because we had a few people on Saturday come up to us. Didn't give any names though, which is unfortunate. But yeah, if you do see us obviously around the games, make sure you do come up and say hello. We don't bite, I promise. Just make sure it's before the game, because if we lose, I'm not very talkative after the game. So make sure it's before. And we shall see you guys in the next one.